Hello. I'm going to read out some very interesting material from Gurdjieff today about sacred symbols. But before I do, I'm going to Thoth. Fire, the inner fire, is the most potent of all force. For it overcometh all things and penetrates to all things of the earth. Man supports himself only on that which resists. So earth must resist man, else he existeth not. All eyes do not see with the same vision, for to one an object appears of one form and colour, and to a different eye of another. So also the infinite fire, changing from colour to colour, is never the same from day to day. Thus speak I, Thoth, of my wisdom. For a man is a fire burning bright through the night, never is quenched in the veil of the darkness, never is quenched by the veil of the night. This long section on symbols comes from Gurdjieff. Realizing the imperfection and weakness of ordinary language, the people who have possessed objective knowledge have tried to express the idea of unity in myths, in symbols, and in particular verbal formulas, which, having been transmitted without alteration, have carried on the idea from one school to another, often from one epoch to another. It has already been said that the higher psychic centers work in man's higher states of consciousness, the higher emotional and the higher mental. The aim of myths and symbols was to reach man's higher centers, to transmit to him ideas inaccessible to the intellect, and to transmit them in such forms as would exclude the possibility of false interpretations. Myths were destined for the higher emotional center, symbols for the higher thinking center. By virtue of this, all attempts to understand or explain myths and symbols with the mind, or the formulas and the expressions which give a summary of their content, are doomed before to failure. It is always possible to understand anything, but only with the appropriate center. But the preparation for receiving ideas belonging to objective knowledge has to proceed by way of the mind, for only a mind properly prepared can transmit the ideas to the higher centers without introducing elements foreign to them. These texts from Gurdjieff contain a great deal of important information in them. For instance, here he says that the mind has to be prepared and in a very good state because it becomes a transparent bridge to the higher centers. One question I would have after hearing this is, what is the point of the higher centers receiving myths and symbols? Is it only for the purpose of activating them? Or is there a practical application? Now, I remember when I was young, I had many times this terrible pain inside me, this ache, where I couldn't understand something. And I was reaching for it. I was struggling to grasp it. And it was a very painful feeling. But I see now that in many cases I was trying to reach into my higher centers. Now, from my own training, which is yogic, from my own teacher, it is clear that certainly in the forehead area and just above it, there is a great deal of different centers. For instance, some people who are able to sense esoteric realms, the astral realms, people who can read the Akashic record. These people are able to open some space there. And those elements are elements of the subconscious realm. By which I mean that if you wish to be conscious, true and whole, they may not have that much information for you, because they point to the stirring of currents and intelligences in the subconscious world. In other words, in the world beneath the threshold of stability, which is what consciousness with a capital C means. I'll continue with Gurdjieff. He says, "The symbols that were used to transmit ideas belonging to objective knowledge included diagrams of the fundamental laws of the universe, and they not only transmitted the knowledge itself, but showed also the way to it. The study of symbols, their construction and meaning, formed a very important part of the preparation for receiving objective knowledge, and it was in itself a test, because a literal or formal understanding of symbols at once made it impossible to receive any further knowledge." Here I think I will show some symbols that I dug up on YouTube today, and almost without exception they are very shallow. Some symbols are the triangle repeated here and there. Other symbols are naturalistic and reflect elements on the earth, simple things. They are like a symbolic representation of ordinary life. Anyway, I will continue with Gurdjieff. He says, "Symbols were divided into the fundamental and the subordinate. The first included the principles of separate domains of knowledge. The second expressed the essential nature of phenomena in their relation to unity. Among the formulas giving a summary of the content of many symbols, there was one which had a particular significance, namely the formula 'as above, so below,' from the emerald tablets of Hermes Trismegistus. This formula stated that all the laws of the cosmos could be found in the atom, or in any other phenomenon which exists as something completed according to certain laws. This same meaning was contained in the analogy drawn between the microcosm man and the macrocosm, the universe. The fundamental laws of triads and octaves penetrate everything and should be studied simultaneously both in the world and in man. But in relation to himself, man is a nearer and a more accessible object of study and knowledge than the world of phenomena outside him. Therefore, in striving towards a knowledge of the universe, man should begin with the study of himself, and with the realization of the fundamental laws within him." From this point of view, another formula, "Know thyself," is full of particularly deep meaning, and is one of the symbols leading to the knowledge of truth. The study of the world and the study of man will assist one another. In studying the world and its laws, a man studies himself, and in studying himself, he studies the world. In this sense, every symbol teaches us something about ourselves. The understanding of symbols can be approached in the following way. In studying the world of phenomena, a man first of all sees in everything the manifestation of two principles, one opposed to the other, which in conjunction or in opposition give one result or another, that is, reflect the essential nature of the principles which have created them. For instance, the full moon and a new moon. This manifestation of the great laws of duality and trinity, man sees simultaneously in the cosmos and in himself, but in relation to the cosmos, he is merely a spectator, and moreover, one who sees only the surface of phenomena which are moving in various directions, though seeming to him to move in one direction. But in relation to himself, his understanding of the laws of duality and trinity can express itself in a practical form, namely, having understood these laws in himself, he can, so to speak, confine the manifestation of the laws of duality and trinity to the permanent line of struggle with himself on the way to self-knowledge. In this way he will introduce the line of will first into the cycle of time and afterwards into the cycle of eternity, the accomplishing of which will create in him the great symbol known by the name the Seal of Solomon. The transmission of the meaning of symbols to a man who has not reached an understanding of them in himself is impossible. This sounds like a paradox, but the meaning of a symbol and the disclosure of its essence can only be given to, and can only be understood by, one who, so to speak, already knows what is comprised in this symbol. And then a symbol becomes for him a synthesis of his knowledge and serves him for the expression and transmission of his knowledge, just as it served the man who constructed it. The more simple symbols, or the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which express them, possess a definite meaning in relation to the inner development of man. They show different stages on the path of man's self-perfection and of the growth of his being. Man, in the normal state natural to him, is taken as a duality. He consists entirely of dualities or pairs of opposites. All man's sensations, impressions, feelings, thoughts are divided into positive and negative, useful and harmful, necessary and unnecessary, good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant. The work of centers proceeds under the sign of this division. Thoughts oppose feelings. Moving impulses oppose instinctive craving for quiet. This is the duality in which proceed all the perceptions, all the reactions, the whole life of man. Any man who observes himself, however little, can see this duality in himself. When self-deceit is destroyed and a man begins to see the difference between the mechanical and the conscious in himself, there begins a struggle for the realization of consciousness in life and for the subordination of the mechanical to the conscious. For this purpose, a man begins with endeavours to set a definite decision, coming from conscious motives, against mechanical processes proceeding according to the laws of duality. The creation of a permanent third principle is for man the transformation of this duality into the Trinity. Strengthening this decision and bringing it constantly and infallibly into all these events, where formerly accidental neutralizing shocks used to act and give accidental results, gives a permanent line of results in time, and is the transformation of Trinity into Quaternity. The next stage, the transformation of Quaternity into Quinternity, and the construction of the pentagram, has not one but many different meanings, even in relation to man. And of these is learned, first of all, one which is the most beyond doubt, relating to the work of centers. The development of the human machine and the enrichment of being begins with the new and unaccustomed functioning of this machine. We know that a man has 5 centers: the thinking, the emotional, the moving, the instinctive, and the sex. The predominant development of any one center at the expense of the others produces an extremely one-sided type of man, incapable of further development. But if a man brings the work of the 5 centers within him into harmonious accord,